All right, with that, we are down to agenda item number 6. This is the Museum Flood Mitigation Plan. I see we got the full team here.
Cracks me up every time because that is not what I see on my screen. But yes, that is Hui. Hopefully she's home being a good girl and not being naughty. Well, good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Shannon Anderson, one of your deputy city managers. Today we're before you to discuss the museum flood mitigation plan. As we might look back, this evening's presentation was prompted by a citizen petition that Council considered during your October 5th Council meeting. This petition was specifically seeking answers to the 37 questions that were attached to the petition, a meeting with both city and county representatives, a comprehensive report of completed mitigation on museum burn scar and watershed, what the outcomes have been, and then lastly, what are the short, mid, and long-term plans for flooding. Given these requests, I thought it would be beneficial to reference the joint city and county meeting that we had on August 23rd, given that we spoke about some of these items. I've attached this presentation to this staff summary, and individuals can also view the streamed or recorded version of it on the city's website. Today we have a terrific team of professionals presenting the mitigation plan updates, funding, and communication. We'll hear from Andy Bertelson, our interim water services director, Sam Beckett. He is our new public works section director overseeing streets. Sam joins us recently from the county where he's been part of public works, emergency management, and was a part of the museum emergency response team this last summer. Ed Schenk from Stormwater, he's the stormwater manager. Scott Overton, our interim public works director. And then Gary Miller, our water services engineering section director. New position for Gary as well. Congratulations on his promotion. So I will turn it over first to Andy, and he'll get us started on the mitigation plan updates.
Thank you, Shannon. I'm Andy Bertelson, interim water services director. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for having us this evening. Anytime we have a disaster response type situation, a big part of responding appropriately is getting the right people in the right places. So we wanted to recognize Shannon for being the calm, cool professional that she was all summer and continues to be. And it just builds on the strength of the team. So with that, during the summer, I served as co-incident commander with Lucinda Andriani, a member of the Coconino County Flood Control District and the deputy county manager. Disasters always bring people together for better or for worse, but it's usually a very bad situation, and we're trying to help improve that situation the best we can. We are battling in those situations an undefeated opponent in Mother Nature. That said, we respond to what Mother Nature provides and try to make the best of the situation. So during the summer, it was response, response, response. And we spent a lot of funds and we utilized a lot of resources. And we have some of the best responders here with us, Scott Overton, and then Sam Beckett was with the county at the time. Through those relationships that we formed, we were very fortunate to bring Sam into our city team. I personally have worked with Sam for a number of years and think highly of him, and we at the city are very lucky to have him on board with us. But it's still a team effort between us and Coconino County Flood Control District. So, after the response efforts take place in the summer, we get together and we say, how can we change this dynamic? Because the definition of insanity is continuing to do the same thing over and over and over again. We did a lot of that this summer. we're partially insane, but we're still here to tell you about it. The Flood Control District was able to coordinate with cooperation from us and our efforts. The Chief Moore visiting, the Forest Service Chief, very significant visit. Very fortunate to have him come here. The Coconino National Forest is a national treasure. He came to visit the Coconino National Forest. With him, the congressional delegations. We were able to show that group the impacts of the museum, post-wildfire flooding, the burn scar. The goal was to get the chief to say, yes, group, you can use federal funds wherever they come from. We weren't quite clear on that yet, on national forest land. After the tour, after the visit, after some really significant and impactful conversations, Chief Moore stood up after the tour and said, not only will we allow this to happen, you have proven to us that this is necessary, I'll pledge to provide the funding. Immediately, I'll let Greg and Shannon know, after probably tearing up a little bit, because that was a very impactful decision, and it's somewhat precedent-setting in how we manage our national forest. And us being a forest with our Forest Health Initiative, a forest community, it's very significant for us here in Flagstaff. So that federal funding for watershed restoration, point being, we need to significantly reduce the amount of sediment that's being delivered to us. There are a lot of things that we're working on trying to complete within the city limits, and these folks will tell you about that. As the flows enter Paradise, down through our neighborhoods, Paradise, Grandview, Sunnyside, Killip School, Route 66. There are a lot of things that we can do in that corridor, but that work could be for naught if we can't look at the sediment reduction measures. And that's what we're hoping to be able to do. I know the Flood Control District are going to be managing those projects. Their goal is to get these implemented prior to the monsoon season next year. That's a pretty lofty goal, but given the effort and time put into this by all of us, I think that there's a lot of work that we're going to be able to do and that they're going to be able to do. I say we because it's a collective team, and anytime there's a successful effort, you want to attach yourself to it. So we're hopeful that will provide mitigation for 400 homes, 35 businesses. Essentially, on the last flood of August 17th, the entire community from West Street to 4th Street down to Route 66, Cedar, and above Linda Vista was completely shut down. School is flooded. Bob Kuhn, the assistant superintendent, was talking to us. We were with the police chief and others at that point. Scott Overton was able to talk to Bob and say, you can evacuate, there's nowhere to go. Shelter in place. There's water in the school. Find the high ground in the school. It was a true emergency situation. That school no longer is being utilized. The goal is to have the new school open by next school year. And that site, we continue to work on the future site of a water retention/detention basin. So continuing to work on that effort. So big news, and this was exactly 2 weeks ago today that Chief Moore pledged that $3.5 million for those efforts. Are there any questions on that? So mitigation update, Natural Resources Conservation Service. We've relied on some of the local experience with the NRCS, Natural Resources Conservation Service. I'm going to turn to Sam Beckett to talk about the project a little bit. But this has also been a pledge to us to be able to utilize this funding source for projects in the upper watershed. So with that, I'll turn it to Sam.
All right. Good afternoon, Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members. Sorry, if I say board members, I apologize. I spent 16 years on a different side of this, so I just want to say thank you for the opportunity. I'm excited to be up here to present in front of you all as Team Flagstaff, a member of Team Flagstaff, so I'm very excited about that. Again, Sam Beckett, my role in a lot of this over the last few years has been a lot of the planning side of it. This year here, I served as the plan section chief for the incident management team, so I've got a little bit of history, a little bit of experience and understanding of what we've been trying to deal with here. As far as the NRCS funds, it's a grant-based system, right? The style of it is trying to get funding for projects that no one else is really going to fund. And it's been really, really key in history with us, dealing with some of our previous floods, to get these fundings in place. Super important to have. Now it is a match-based system. You'll see that on the bottom there. It's a 25% match. This was something that was part of that discussion when the Forest Service came in to make sure that we had that in place. Two of the big items are, I apologize, yeah. I might overshadow.
You got to get an
mic.
extension cord.
Yeah, if we can just get this up a little bit higher, it's not a big deal. I can, we'll work on that, there is a 40-acre parcel above Mount Eldon Estates. I think most of you have been on all the tours. You've been into Mount Eldon Estates. Just up from there, there's a 40-acre parcel that's been identified to get some work done in there to help reduce sediment flow. Sediment is a huge piece of what we're trying to reduce. The water is important. The sediment is even more important. We want to keep the mountain up on the mountain. The 3.6 acres that you see listed in there is a parcel just above Linda Vista. And now we'll see that here in just a second. Natural Channel Design has been working on a concept to put in 4 sediment basins to help reduce even more of that sediment as it comes down. Now that comes with a cost. There is a maintenance process that goes with that. But ultimately, this is going to fund the projects. And that's the biggest piece of this, right? That's a huge, huge chunk of money here to get that in. Again, it goes back to the partnerships that Andy and Shannon both talked about, that partnership with the county and the city. The county from the flood control district is going to match that 25%, and so that's a huge, huge piece of that, and we're very appreciative of that. This here is that concept design that we were discussing. So if you look at it, you can see that there's going to be 4 basins when it's all said and done. And those basins are designed to help trap and reduce that sediment flow into the stormwater system, so Ed doesn't have to stress nearly as much about that, hopefully, if everything goes into place. That comes in right off of Paradise. If you know where Park Way is right there, that little cul-de-sac as you head up Paradise on the right-hand side, you can see that they've got it designed where there is easy access to be able to get in there, because it is a maintenance-based system, right? This is designed to drop out sediment, which means over time they're going to have to be cleaned out so that system stays up and running. But again, this all goes back to the success of getting that funding. Huge, huge importance to get that funding. All right. I'm going to hand this over to Ed Shank. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Ed Shank, Stormwater Manager. This summer, I also served on the Incident Management Team, the IMT, for both operations and engineering. And back in 2019, several of us also served on EOC or IMT during the flood, or during the fire, I should say. So we've all been working on this for several years now. The engineering group is actually still meeting weekly to work on these different issues. So this is still taking quite a bit of our daily and weekly duties to address these issues. What we're seeing here on this slide is work that's been done this fall. This was a city-county project to stabilize, restore, enhance the channel at the top of Paradise. If you're up there before this project, you'll see that was a bottleneck. It was a really tight area for the channel at the top of the Paradise cul-de-sac with a Forest Service hill slope on the north side of it. So the county and the city went in roughly 50-50 to enhance this. Luckily, we already had NEPA in place with the Forest Service going back to 2019, and we worked with the Forest Service to have the approval go through pretty quickly here. So this enhancement essentially took the bottleneck, which was a rather dangerous area. We had 2 overtoppings of those barriers that you see there during the flood events, and allowed us to expand that to take in quite a bit more capacity, as well as to stabilize those channels again. So those rocks that you see at the bottom there are actually engineered to keep the channel in place, to stabilize it, which is important both for sediment reduction and sediment transport, and then also for the utilities that are in that area. Water Services does have a main line that comes down from the Paradise tank that feeds the Paradise and Grandview area that we need to protect. And then just upstream of this picture is actually the Kinder Morgan pipeline as well. So a lot of utilities that we need to maintain here and a lot of work that goes into it. If you haven't been up there, I highly recommend taking a look at some point when there's not much traffic. Projects we're working on right now, there's several, but the one that's front and center in our world right now is the Dorothea Inlet and Channel. So this is a channel enhancement from Cedar down to Dorothea to allow a little more flow through there, and then the Dorothea Inlets to allow flow to go under the Dorothea Avenue. At the moment, we have a 60-inch corrugated metal pipe at Dorothea, and the channel above that, even though it's been cleaned out several times over the summer, is still fairly small for the amount of flow that we're going to be seeing. We're considering future maintenance, obviously, when we're doing this design. Since we have had to muck that out several times this summer, we want to make sure that we're not spending a whole lot of money with that sediment removal. A lot of this we're still working with our feasibility analysis. This is an analysis that we're working with a couple of our local consulting teams in Flagstaff to make sure that we have this sized correctly for the larger system. And the estimated construction cost due to the utility relocates and utility protections and property is up to $2 million. So it is a little bit of a project here.
I have a question on the Dorothea Inlet.
Sure.
So I know our construction costs have been going up dramatically this last year. When we were looking at this before, it was about $900,000 to $1 million. Are we doing additional work, or is this the same amount of work we were originally expecting, $900,000, that is now going to $2 million?
It's a little bit of both.
Okay.
So it's a little bit of the cost going up, and then there's also a little extra work going into it compared to the original design.
Okay.
So just seeing and having validation of the flows that we're seeing does require us to change design slightly so that we have a more robust design for the amount of water we're expecting to see.
Okay, thank you. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Ed. Back to the Dorothea Inlet. Am I correct that we already have the money budgeted and that we expect to have that project done soon?
We do have that budgeted through stormwater capital improvements. And with that design, it's still being vetted by the city, but it's very close. And we have that with our capital improvement team. So Christine Cameron is the project manager for it. So our hope, our desire is to have this all done before monsoons so that we can tie it eventually into the Killip School detention basin. And with that, I'll move on to Scott.
Scott Overton, Interim Public Works Director, and also I served, obviously, since the museum fire, but this past summer as your Incident Management Team Section Operations Chief for the Bravo Division, which is the most urban, dense portion of the division. I covered territory from top of Paradise all the way to Butler and 4th Street. So clearly the largest, probably urban section of the floodway. And you've heard about the pieces and the parts, and there's two really important pieces that I'll speak to that I've been working on, the Killip Detention Basin and then the feasibility piece. One thing that I wish we'd kind of conveyed early is Andy really underscored the need to keep sediment on the mountain. And we've all recognized, every engineer in the room has recognized, the more work we can do in the entire region is great, but the most impactful will be to keep sediment up on the mountain. This past summer, we hauled just over 11,000 tons of debris out of the area. And I think that resonated. I think that resonated with our delegation, with our Forest Service representatives, and I think it was a very strong story we told. And I think it was a success of the county and the city working together to demonstrate a lot of these project efforts are not going to be as effective as we hope if we can't keep a lot of the sediment and debris on the actual mountain. So our goal, first place, is let's try to do as much as possible on forest. But as you've heard moving downstream, we know there's a reality of continued sediment. Not everything will stay on the mountain. Some of it's just going to be the best guess we can get at the top. And then we, of course, still have the water flows. So as Ed has kind of worked downstream, Sam covered some of those detention basin efforts on Paradise. Ed has now provided a little more insight between Cedar and the Arroyo Seco area. And then there's a couple bottlenecks that we continue to evaluate as well. We didn't cover them tonight, but we continue to look at those. But another very large one that is very timely is the Killip Detention Basin. This one coincides with the new elementary school that is being built on the existing school site. The former Killip School is now demolished. The newer school is to the east and built out of the floodway. We are in pretty good negotiations in what I would consider kind of the last design effort of a very good area to place a lot of water. We're looking between 8 and 11 acre feet of water to be stored on the Killip School site. We're working with Core Construction, that is the contractor that is building the school and completing their on-site improvements, and SWI, Shepherd Witznitzer Engineering. Those two are assisting the school district and the city in this collaborative effort to try to not only design the best system possible for this area and detain as much as possible, but if you think about it, this really provides a lot of relief to all of our residents living south of 6th Avenue. And we know that even though it's a small area and it's only 6th Avenue South that might receive the greatest impact, it is the greatest impact to a lot of residents. And we hope that this will do a lot of good work at not only storing that water, but slowly releasing it versus a sheer flood of water, as well as some debris detention at that site in silt, debris, or sediment that isn't caught upstream. In addition to the actual ponds that will be utilized as play surfaces, fields, soccer fields, softball fields in the future years as they can be developed, there's an underground stormwater infrastructure piece that's very important that moves the water from the detention basins down 6th Avenue and connects to 3rd Street. That's another really important piece that we're nailing down the final details with. This will come back to you in the next few months. We have an IGA that will clearly articulate not only the construction design, but also our cost shares from the school district and the city. And then we anticipate a maintenance agreement with what that will look like for years to come in terms of the needed maintenance during storm events and then just annual maintenance. This next one I really need you to spend just a second to concentrate on. It's the most boring piece, but also the most exciting for our engineering group. We have commissioned a feasibility flooding analysis, and this is a part of a two-piece effort. The first piece was a new modeling effort, and the county took that piece on late summer. It is currently and has been underway for about a month and a half now. J.E. Fuller and Joe Lovrich are now developing new modeling that will show from Forest through the actual Spruce Avenue wash what our model looks like based on some of the real-time feedback we got from these past storms. That piece is really important for these engineers to understand how much water, where does it go, what does it look like. This next piece the city is taking, and this is the feasibility analysis. So we have now contracted with Peak Engineering. Julie Lead, who you have met, she sits on your Transportation Commission, and she weighs in a lot of times on transportation issues. Very, very familiar with this project. Her firm is now taking all of the data, all of the modeling, and they're performing the actual technical analysis. And I know it's time consuming, and I know we wish it were done yesterday, but we've got to give them some room, and we've been giving them as much information as possible. And this is the meeting that Ed was speaking to. Weekly we meet as an engineering team, and it's pretty cool to see all these different engineering firms and all these government officials really speaking to each other and working through all their issues, because without good modeling and without good feasibility, we don't know if it's a good project, if it's money well spent, if it's a project that doesn't create different effects. So Julie's analysis is critical at this point to really get us good feedback that says it is a meaningful improvement, it doesn't create adverse impacts downstream, and it makes sense to deliver as quickly as possible. Ed had mentioned their focus is to move to the projects that we're pushing quickly: the Killip site, the Dorothea site, the Linda Vista Crossing, the ponds. They're adjacent to Paradise. It's awkward for them because they don't want to start in the middle and work both ends of this watershed, but unfortunately that's where we're at. So they've been doing that work. We expect that to be done in the next couple months. They will rank a lot of our longer-term projects so that you can have good information about how you prioritize budget dollars. They're also going to prepare some analysis and alternatives. So if something doesn't work, we've asked what would work. What are some different ways we can approach this issue from a different design perspective? And we, of course, want to rank these projects so that as you have limited dollars and resources, we can assign those to the highest ranking projects. It's a little bit awkward. We would have loved to have all this done before these projects were on the table, but they've done a good job of trying to incorporate the efforts we're currently underway with into their feasibility analysis. And I messed it up. All right, next one, funding of this mitigation comes back to Andy, and good luck.
Good luck.
See this relationship that we have? Says good luck and walks away. So the feasibility analysis, and the goal has been not analysis and get paralysis in doing so, right? It's analysis with intent. And Vice Mayor, you had asked about the Dorothea project, and you've all identified projects that need to happen, and we've identified them here, and they're no different. This is the same list that you witnessed at our council retreat on September 30th. In doing so, we need to make sure that we're doing the right thing in the right places. And by that I mean we upsized the Linda Vista culvert last year, doubled the size from rough numbers, 150 cubic feet per second to 300. It needs to be doubled yet again. When we doubled the size of that culvert, we utilized city dollars in which to do so. We couldn't accept the federal dollars in which to do it because their timeline was not conducive to the timeline that we were on. In other words, we're working in minutes, and we couldn't wait on their weeks or days or hours. So we're just really accelerating these timelines. We recognize, especially folks like Scott and I, that it does present a certain level of discomfort with engineers, and that we're really pushing them to say, we understand we need to study this. We understand we need to make that we're doing the right thing in the right places, but our timeline is right now. And in fact, it was yesterday for many of the residents, rightfully so. It's a terrible situation. So with that sediment reduction, and Scott highlighted that is a big move, and we're really excited to be able to be a part of that project in any way we can, and how it ties into what we're trying to do for our local community, our local residents in the city-built environment. So the Spruce Channel Master Plan development, as Scott had mentioned, Paradise Channel improvements, Ed talked about that a bit. Parkway area detention, retention, that's essentially the basins that Sam had talked about. Linda Vista culvert improvement, I had mentioned we doubled the size. We need to double the size yet again for the entirety of that channel. Down to the Cedar culvert, it's a box culvert under the roadway of Cedar Avenue. As you all know, you saw the box culvert being replaced out here on Route 66. Those are a bit bigger projects, but it's something that needs to happen. And then the channels in between, from Linda Vista to Cedar Culvert, Dorothea Channel, and then eventually working to get those flows in a safe place like the current Killip School location. So the Dorothea Inlet, then Arroyo Seco. So you'll see there's a diversion there. Arroyo Seco still takes on a lot of water, I'll use that term. And then Ponderosa Park has been an outlet for that. Ponderosa Park is where we have the new pickleball courts. It's a beautiful community amenity. Some of that amenity will need to, it's already flowing through there, and so we'll need to somehow solidify that for the future to ensure that it gets to that Killip School detention basin. And then various channel improvements, and we call them hot spots or spot improvements as are necessary. So in total, the estimated cost is between $12 to $18 million. They're not small numbers. But those are the numbers that we're working off of going forward. Like I'd said, the group that we have assembled, and I know folks get frustrated, well, how long are you going to study it when you're going to do something? And we're really pushing those timelines as hard as we can to make sure that we implement the projects that need to be implemented. And you live and learn. So we did the right thing, and it's all with good intention. We doubled the size of the Linda Vista culvert. It needs to be doubled yet again. We didn't anticipate that we would get 3 hours of rain in an hour, producing 1,200 to 1,800 cubic feet per second through our community. Those are significant rain events. And when you look at the climate models and you look at the significant impact when it rains, it pours, that truthed out for us this summer. Didn't rain. We had the monsoons the last 2 summers. Who knows what the future holds, but we'll be prepared for it the best that we can. This infrastructure, we won't be able to build to that 12 to 1,800 cubic feet per second through our urban infrastructure. We're looking at about 600 cubic feet per second right now. That would allow us to manage a quote-unquote normal rain event or even an inch of rain in an hour, which is a significant rain event. But those major rain events that we witnessed and experienced and lived through this summer were hugely impactful. And to build to that infrastructure, our cost would increase exponentially. We talked about bypasses. That's another, $20 million on top of these $12 to $18 million that we're already talking about. So thank you for your time. I believe Shannon has communication with residents slides, and I'll turn to Shannon, and then we'll have Q&A afterwards.
All right. Well, typically you'd be hearing from Sarah Langley at this point, but she is on vacation this week. Good for her, taking some much-needed time. So I'm going to go through the communication with residents slide. As part of this petition, as we mentioned, we received 37 questions. We've also received questions through City Council, through some of the boards of supervisors, directly from residents. And so we've accumulated all of those in 2 FAQ documents. One that is about flood mitigation, emergency response, emergency declarations. That's going to be on our Flood Control District website. Things that are specific to city services, you're going to find that on our city services website. So those are the 2 locations where people will be able to find the answers to their questions that they've submitted. We've provided links here within the presentation. In addition, what we've been hearing in some of our neighborhood meetings is the desire to be able to log a question or a concern on the computer or on a web-based program instead of having to make a phone call. And so we wanted to remind folks that we do have a request tracker. We think that this would be a good solution to supplement the call center that the county currently has in place. And it also is a web-based solution. So individuals can type their question or their comment into the request tracker on the city's website, and that goes to the appropriate individuals to be able to respond to that question or concern. There was also a desire to want to have more communication with council. And so as a result, staff would recommend that we look at work sessions. I realize work sessions sometimes can feel confining, right? We have them every other Tuesday, but I want to remind us that we can have work sessions on other dates if that works, at different times if that works. But the benefit of using a work session is that you can engage in 2-way communication because it's an agendized meeting. And so that's why this is a recommendation from staff, that we create work sessions where you can have communication with impacted residents, provide updates, hear their questions, and provide responses. And then the last piece is a work in progress. We are currently looking at a public relations consultant to provide services related to museum flood as well as the mitigation efforts. They would be helping us with written materials, with public notices, to where we can really be focusing on the responses and the mitigation and be using experts to help us with that messaging. So we will be ferrying that out a little bit further, and once we have some more recommendations, can bring that forward in a future update as well. So those are the ideas that we have and recommendations on communication, but I know this is an important topic to council, so certainly we're here to answer questions, hear your feedback on all of the information that's been presented to you tonight.
Thank you, Shannon. Well, before we get into discussion and questions,